another Ants on a Rock video. Welcome to the Ant Corner. A beginner's guide on what to do when your ants first arrive. So the first thing you need to do is to open your package. Normally they're really well packaged. They normally come wrapped in bubble wrap, sometimes even styrofoam around them, lots and lots of layers. Sometimes they come with a heat pack if you've got an exotic species that require heating. So it's a little bit of a process to get into your package correctly. You want to try and do this rather gently. I always keep a Stanley blade or a really sharp knife handy, and I work my way in with that layer by layer. Now, I haven't actually bought a colony for this video, so I'm just going to show you with an empty test tube, and you're going to have to imagine there's some ants in there. So normally about a third of the way up you would get a cotton wool stopper. Behind this you'll get water. This is to keep water in the test tube for your ants whilst they're in this founding stage. Right, so now you've unwrapped it, you want to have a look at your ants in the test tube. Make sure they're looking good, they're not damaged, not dead, and try not to take too long or vibrate and shake them about, because they won't like that, and you don't really want to stress them out more after they've just come in the post and had a move. Of course, if they are damaged or dead, you can normally send a quick email or message to the supplier, and most suppliers are going to be happy to replace those ants straight away from you with no questions really asked. All you'll need to do is provide photo evidence of your damaged or dead ants, and most suppliers will be more than happy to send you some more out as soon as they possibly can. I am going to put a long list in the description of good quality ant suppliers in the UK and possibly Europe, depending on the supplier and species that they're sending. So make sure you check that out in the description below. The next thing that I'd like to do, but you don't have to do, is to cover this in some red film. Now, I have a massive sheet like this, A3 sheet of see-through red film. Now, you can buy this quite easily on Amazon and eBay. There's lots of different suppliers. So I take my test tube, and remember there's a cotton wool stopper about here. So only this bit here has the ants, and this is a stopper as well. So the ants are only towards the centre here. So that size there is more than enough. And you only need to wrap around the test tube once. So we're going to cut. There we go. There we go. We've got a nice little red thing, red square. No, it's really easy. All you need to do, wrap it round. Camera's going a little bit out of focus. Wrap it round and stick it down with some tape. So when you've done that and you've wrapped it around the test tube nice and tightly, it should look something a bit like this. Most ants can't see the red spectrum of light, so it comes out as dark to them. But I also like to give an extra layer for any time I'm not observing the ants. For this I like to use tin foil because it's quite pliable and easy to work with. So we're going to get a piece of tin foil, again about the same size as that. Maybe a little bit longer, but I like to leave a little gap at the end so that you can keep watching how much water is in the test tube. So simple as this. Of course your ants are in here, so you want to be as careful as possible. Nice and gently, just wrap it round. like so. Now, the problem here is it rolls. It rolls a lot. Like, that could roll anywhere. It could fall off the table, you could knock it, jiggle it. It's not really vibration proof at this point. So what I like to do is just get a little piece of blue tack or a piece of white tack and just pop it on the end, like so. And that just stops it from rolling about. They're nice and secure there, so you can leave them quite happily knowing that they're not going to roll off the table. So now, depending on if you bought a queen or a colony, if you bought just a queen, you need to know if she's fully claustral or semi-claustral. If she's fully claustral, then you just need to put her away, nice and warm spot, and try not to touch her for about a month, maybe a month and a half. If you absolutely can't help yourself, every 2 weeks is okay, but any more than that and you're going to disturb her too often and she will eat her eggs. The best thing to do with a queen is just to leave her alone, vibration free, away from loud noises, away from the light, and just in a nice constant temperature. If she is semi-claustral, it's slightly different. She's going to need to leave the test tube to forage. So for this, I like to use a tubes and tubs setup. I will show you this at the end of the video, so make sure you keep watching. Now, if you bought a colony with workers or you absolutely cannot wait, you're going to want to feed them. Ants survive off a few different things. They always need fresh water. That is an absolute must. 100%, 24/7, cannot fail to give them. They also need a source of carbohydrates and a source of protein. Now these can vary and you can give it on varying days. I like to give mine protein every 2 days and carbohydrates every 4, refilling a honey water dispenser in and out world every week. This gives them a chance to process what they've taken, and it won't lead to such things as protein poisoning or exhaustion from not having carbohydrates. So what you're going to need is a little tiny piece of tin foil, about that size, small enough to go into the test tube without a problem. Now quite a lot of suppliers will send you something like this: protein jelly or honey. That's really handy as well, really handy. This organic honey is really amazing. I cannot say how amazing it is. The ants go absolutely nuts for it. I use it so much all the time with all my different colonies. Cannot recommend it more. Now I usually find that after being sent some ants, they've usually just been fed, normally with some carbohydrates as in honey. So we're going to take that away, and I will show you with a little bit of protein jelly how I go about feeding them in the test tube. It's a little bit fiddly and my hands are a little bit shaky, and when I use the syringe I always make a mess, but you'll get the general idea. So just a little bit on the tin foil, just like that. That's probably actually a bit much there, so I'm just going to use the back of my tweezers to take some away. Now the next trick is to pop it inside the test tube. So again, I like to hold the test tube when I do this, just to try and keep it as still as possible. Gently pull the cotton wool so it's most of the way out, and get your tweezers ready with the food. Now I am not the quickest, like I say, I haven't got steady hands, but I usually get away with not too many escapees, and I'll tell you why in a second. So you take the plug out, food in, plug back in, and it's as easy as that. You leave them to it. Again, leaving them in the dark will keep them nice and calm, and they'll just get on with eating. You could also give them, at this stage, a cricket leg or a couple of small chopped up pieces of mealworm. Do not give them live food at this stage, because your ants just won't be able to survive it. Some species, such as the harvester ants, also require seeds. At this stage, they don't have the large majors which are required for crushing up the seeds. So any seeds you give them need to be pre-crushed before you put them into the test tube. Again, I wouldn't leave this food in for more than 2 days, possibly even just one. It's a very simple process. Again, you just pull the plug out, quick and as gentle as you can with your tweezers, pull out the remaining food and replace the plug. As long as you're calm and you don't panic, then your ants shouldn't get hurt and you shouldn't get many escapees. If you do end up leaving the food in there too long, and eventually you'll find that mould starts to build up around the cotton wool, around the water might even dry out. You're going to need to move them into a new test tube. Again, I'll do a whole nother video on this, so subscribe to my page, keep watching for those updates, and I'll get that video out to you fairly soon. With some species in the test tube, you may find that heating is required. Now, this can be a bit of a touchy subject. If you heat the end with the water, you may cause heat fluctuations, which will cause the water to flood the tube, which will kill your ants. Trust me, I actually did this myself once. It was the biggest mistake I've ever made in ant keeping, and I will never make that mistake again. Always heat the front end, just behind the cotton wool. I find works quite well. That gives them lots of space and heat gradient up to the most moist part, where they can be nice and cool. That gives them plenty of choice and good areas to rear the brood. Again, I know you're going to be eager to get them into a nest, a proper nest, and out of the test tube. But if you've got less than 50 workers, it's just not a great idea at this point. Ants like to be in tight, confined spaces, like this test tube, in the dark with a bit of moisture. So this is the perfect place for them at this stage. It mimics the claustral chamber of the queen ant in the wild. When you are having problems feeding the ants and they're escaping everywhere every time you open the tube, you have a few options. If it is a very large colony and you've done well to keep them in the tube, possibly 50 to 100 workers, then you can look at putting them into a small nest. If you've got less than that, then there's a few options you can go with. There are very, very small found-in nests that I will show you in a second. These found-in nests are really awesome. They're very small, just single chamber, just enough for your queen and her first nanitics to keep rearing a little bit of brood and to go out into a foraging section. I like to attach mine to these smaller outworlds, as again it's not giving them too much space and they won't be too intimidated. Another option is to add your test tube to a found-in outworld. These things are really small, normally just little square boxes that fit onto the end of your test tube. These allow for easy feeding. You just simply drop the food into the box and your ants will come out of the test tube and feed upon it. I've had a lot of success with these and a few not so successful runs. I found with some of the larger species, they didn't actually enjoy coming out of the test tube much, because they're sort of that awkward size where it was slightly the wrong size for them. They couldn't climb down and they couldn't just walk down. They needed assistance basically. So I had to put a little bit of stone there for them to climb down on, and then that fixed that remedy. Smaller species I find just climb straight down, they climb all around the box, it's completely not a problem, and they really enjoy it. But really small species such as Lasius niger have a tendency to crawl through the hinges and escape. So I like to keep the smaller species in the founding outworlds inside of a larger outworld, so it's still contained. Another option you have is, as I mentioned earlier, tubs and tubes setup. Now I'm really fond of these because it gives you the chance to give your ants a natural setup. If you add in the right things, you'll find that your ants will probably build a barrier at the entrance of their test tube. This helps them feel secure and protected within that tight confinement of a space again. It also gives them the chance to leave the test tube if it becomes mouldy, or if they just find a better environment. Which, if you're planning on being a good ant keeper, that's what you should be aiming for. You should be aiming to be giving them the best environment you possibly can for them. And if you do, they will want to move into it. Again, these are easy to set up, and I have done previous videos on this, so make sure you check in the description and I'll put a link to that video below. A few last things I want to point out. Not all queens work. They're not all what we would call good queens. Sometimes they won't lay eggs at all. Sometimes they just won't hatch the eggs. Sometimes they'll have the first 10, 20, maybe even 50 workers and then just stop laying. There's a whole possibility of reasons, and sometimes the queens even die. It's not always your fault. These things just happen, and it's all part of nature. Only the strongest survive. We know that. So don't get disheartened. Try again. Some of the best advice I ever got was to buy multiple queens. If you really want a colony, buy 2 or 3 of that colony, and then hopefully you'll have at least one success. If you have multiple successes, then it's only really a good thing, isn't it? And if you can't house those multiple successes, then you can probably find someone who will. Ant keeping has become such a widespread hobby over the last few years. You'll find many new people are joining the hobby every day. So you'll probably find someone that will be happy to take that colony off your hands if you can no longer house it and feed for it and care for it. Again, ant keeping isn't as easy as it's always made out to be. Some people make it look really easy. Some people like me, not so much. We do make mistakes. Sometimes we do make fatal mistakes. The aim is to always learn from these mistakes, and I aim to teach you about the mistakes I've made. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you found it full of knowledge and helpful insights. I'm going to put another little link to my bioactive setup as well in the description, so you can see how I go about making those. So again, you're going to have a long list of great UK suppliers for ants. You're going to have links to my bioactive setup and links to how to move ants out of a mouldy test tube. That will come out soon, and a link to how to make a tubs and tubes setup correctly for your ants to go into. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please feel free to leave me a comment. I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Let me know if you want to see any other videos, any content in particular that you would like me to film for you, and I'll get round to that as soon as possible as well. Peace out, ant fans.